Everybody, or good day, depending on where you are. Here it is 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we are here today with Karen, our incredible, knowledgeable, bright, fun, and loving Karen, who is our childcare education panelist. And today we've got some really cool topics. Before we get started, how are you doing, Karen?
Doing well, doing well. Everything is momentum forward.
I'm loving it. Yes, just before we got on the call in the green room, we were talking about how, we've been working so hard, and right now everything seems to be coming together. And that's what it really sinks in with what Hack Mind is about. Hack Mankind is about. What we do is we have these little hacks, these daily panelist calls, these hack of the days that we'll talk about today as well. It relates to children and education. And it gets to a point, because we stack these little ones, all little baby steps together, it creates exponential growth. And we're experiencing in the team, in ourselves, in our own life. And that's what we want for you. Tuning in and making sure that you can tune in, please head on over to www.hackmankind. We are changing the version. It's going to be a Hack Mankind 2.0. So I'm not sure that we will be broadcasting on Facebook. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, make sure you only need to do is enter your email, www.hackmankind.com, so you're aware of what the changes are going to be, and you can continue having access to our wonderful panel calls, our support calls, and all our other calls. We have a lot of content and goodies coming on the backstage, with programs and courses that you wouldn't have access anywhere else, or even at the rates, or so www.hackmankind.com, always free, first frontline responders. So thank you to all our teachers, our doctors, EMTs, nurses, police officers, and firefighters. You're always welcome for free to our content. So thank you so much. Let's get started, Karen. Yeah. So should we start theme of the day a week, or should we start temper tantrums?
Yeah, so I think the request, it seems, has been to talk about temper tantrums. And so and I know that we've got some themes around language and words and differences in meaning, and so maybe I'll build it into our discussion about temper tantrums. I can start just with the word temper tantrum. So culturally, that has different words. So some call them tempers, some call them tantrums, temper tantrums, hissy fits, right? We've heard that phrase, and there's probably others. You can post in the comments what you might be using in your home or in your schools. Here, I've kind of adopted temper tantrums, probably handed down to me from my parents, and they from their parents. And so, we can talk about what a temper tantrum is, and ways in which to sort of mitigate, right? Because you can't avoid them. And factually, we all have them, right? We pin them on children most of the time, but we all have temper tantrums. So they look different, right? With different ages, but we all have them. So I want to sort of ask everybody to take a moment to step back and think about when you had your last temper tantrum. And what did it look like? Now, I'm not sure, but I suspect you probably weren't throwing yourself on the ground, banging your head, kicking your feet, and screaming and yelling. And I hope you weren't hitting someone or pulling at their shirt or their skirt, which is so typical of children. But in a way, you were having a temper tantrum. Maybe you slammed down a phone, maybe you threw something across the room, maybe you stomped and yelled, but it is just simply an uncontrolled outburst. And it's generally fueled by frustration and anger. So we all experience those feelings, and how do we address those feelings, control those feelings, keep ourselves in check? And what if we could take a moment to look at that, then we can start to help children develop the skills to control and keep in check temper tantrums. So that's where I'm going today. I don't know if we have any questions or anybody has shared what they use for the word temper tantrums? Have any reactions? I don't know if you're with me, Jessica. You with me? I think not. Okay, so
Um,
there you
so
are.
I am having a little connectivity issues with, can you hear me?
Very garbled. Yeah.
So, as luck would have it, ladies and gentlemen, I was lurking in the background, so we'll give Jess time to reset her machine. So, Karen, temper tantrums. I have a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. So,
Congratulations.
yes, thank you. So, I didn't hear the beginning. As I said, I literally just jumped on because I find these talks fascinating. So, I'll give you two of my temper tantrums, one of my daughter, one of my son. So my daughter, once in a supermarket, decided she wasn't playing anymore. And we'd lined up the game in advance. You know, it was one of those things where you have the gun where you can scan stuff. So she was responsible for scanning, and she had things she had to find. So it was all as managed as best as I know how. She was engaged in it, and then she didn't want to play anymore. And then she threw the gun, and then it's Olivia, stop doing that. And you overreact slightly because you're in public.
Yes.
And you're slightly embarrassed. And she gets down on the floor and she starts taking stuff out of the trolley, smashing it on the floor. So I did exactly the same. And I started throwing stuff around as well until she looked at me and went, "You are absolutely," her exact words are, "What are you doing, Daddy?" And I said, "Well, I just thought that's what we did now, Olivia," until she looked at me like I was crazy and she stopped. Now, my daughter has a level of emotional intelligence, which my son maybe doesn't have so much, and he's more of a kind of blunt force trauma way of getting his way. And in a very similar situation, he just thought it was really funny and carried on doing exactly the same as he was doing. So now, actually, everyone's looking at me as the willing adult that is helping my son throw stuff on the floor. So that would be my experience with tantrums.
Yeah. So what you're really telling me is that, and highlighting for me, thank you, is that every child is different. So what you might do for one will not work with the other. And so I always start with the perspective of research. So as a parent, as a teacher, you're a researcher, and what you're collecting is data. So Olivia, you've already defined, has an emotional intelligence that you can play off of, you can work with, whereas your son is more a little bit more of a challenge, maybe a little bit more of an enigma. And so you're going to have to draw on some research to figure out how to respond to each one of these children, and it's going to be different. So you're going to be a different parent in ways with one than the other. And a lot of parents bristle by that because they think, well, I should be the same parent with both children because that's what's fair and that's what's, that's equitable. That's what they expect, but that is in fact not equitable. If it doesn't work for one and works for the other, then it may seem more like favoritism.
Yeah, I can talk about that from a perspective of leadership and management, whereby your intent with everyone you deal with should be the same, but the manner with which you approach it needs to be very different because people are different. One sentence you might say to somebody will motivate them. Somebody else will see it as an insult. The way this was explained to me a long time ago was actually in a totally different context of my fear of dogs. I used to be scared witless of dogs. And I now have like a 100-pound German Shepherd, so obviously I'm not anymore. And it was a person who actually owned 2 German Shepherds, and I was staying with them. And he said to me, he said, "You don't understand. A dog only has a 1-word vocabulary. Right? His word is woof. Right? He barks. But he barks when he's hungry, when he's sad, when he's frightened, when he's frustrated, when he's happy, when he's, all of these emotions that we have as humans that we are relatively good at expressing, probably not as good as we think we are, but relatively good. Dogs only have 1 word." And I that kind of awoke me up to a different relationship with dogs, of looking at their intent and then going, okay, I don't need to be scared of this. This is actually, they're scared of me. So how do I change that? Taking that into childhood, it's okay, this tantrum, what I'm seeing, what is it that I'm actually being told?
Right. Because oftentimes children are like dogs, they only have 1 word, or a few words, right? And they can't put them all together to express to you exactly what they're feeling.
Yeah, and I was told this weird thing by a child psychologist, which I don't know if it's true or not, but it helps. And I'm okay to accept untruths if they still help.
They help you, yes.
Was that a child develops physically and then mentally and then physically and then mentally, and their brain energy is put into one of the two places. And these kind of scotoma moments where it's like, what is going on, is where their physical capabilities have extended beyond their mental capabilities, or vice versa. So they're literally ridiculously frustrated.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when we're frustrated, as you said, we throw stuff, we say things we don't mean, we punch walls, whatever it might be, and we learn to suppress that, I guess, as we get older slightly, but it's still in us.
Yeah.
So I would rephrase your question, if I may, so not as when is the last time you had a tantrum, but when is the last time you felt a tantrum?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Because as you know me, I'm a relatively big guy. I can't hit people. I'm not, obviously I shouldn't anyway, but I was taught as a teenager, I got in a fight with somebody, and it was over something ridiculous, and I punched them. I was 13, and I broke their jaw. And this was a really good friend of mine. I didn't want to do that. And a teacher pulled me to one side, and many teachers then pulled me to one side over a course of probably a couple of months, probably 2 days, but it felt like a couple of months to me. And said, you need to understand that as somebody that's quite big, you can't do that, right? The outcome of you losing your temper will be something worse than you want it to be. So I don't lose, me and Liz were talking about this the other day, my wife, and I said, have the kids ever seen me angry? And she went, never, not once, not once. Because I know what my anger looks like. And my anger is burn the building down level of anger. So it can never come out.
Yeah.
I have to walk away. So I think the better question for people is not necessarily when did you last throw a tantrum, but when did you ever last feel a tantrum?
Mm-hmm.
Because adults have the ability to suppress it, children don't.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm trying to get to. So thank you. Is how did you learn to suppress it? How do you suppress it? What skills and techniques do you use to suppress it? Because those are the ones that we potentially have to pass on to our children. And what we have to remember is that our children are watching what we do. So I see, a question here or a statement here, who did the child, learn her behavior from? Great question, because we are models of behavior for our children. And anybody who comes into their life that they see as a significant person is a model for behavior. And so there's the possibility that, Olivia figured out how to have that emotional intelligence through some of the modeling that you and your wife have put forth. And I know you're going to say it doesn't work with Sam, so we're going to have a conversation about that.
No, what I'm going to say is two things, because I knew you were about to say that, and I knew I was about to bristle as soon as you said it.
Yep.
And I don't mind that I bristle. I do mind if other people do, and then they don't listen, or they don't hear what you're saying. So I want to focus in on the other sentence you said, which is model someone of significance. That can be The Simpsons. Right? That can be the 9 o'clock news. That's why we're all so concerned about children and video games. It's not just that they're modeling you as adults. And it's why when they enter the nursery years and above, or the kindergarten years and above, right, you lose a bit of control as a parent. So I'm not saying it isn't me or Liz, don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's all of those stimulus put together. And I think that's where parents then get so out of their league quite quickly, because you're like, where did this come from? Like when your daughter first, or son, and I think most have had it, first spit at you. Like, where did that come from? I have never spat in front of my children. My wife has never spat in front of my children. We certainly haven't spat at each other. And yet suddenly this is now okay. And I think that an interesting side note, and then I think Jess has her connection back, so I'm going to hand it back to her because I'm now talking more than you, which is not the point of this, but I wasn't expecting to talk, so I wasn't kind of lined up for this. The fascinating thing for me is that it's just a total sidebar. Me and my mum have had a conversation regularly as who has it harder as parents. Is it my mum's generation or my generation? Right, my mum's generation, you know, they don't have the technology, they don't have the tools, they don't have the internet, they can't watch YouTube, they can't do Zoom calls, they couldn't do any of that. But the expectations, certainly in the UK, was keep them alive and you've won. And that's kind of the end of the expectations. And there was a tribe and a village that was looking after children collectively, which is exactly what we were always supposed to do. My generation, we've got all the technology, we've got all the tools, we've got access to infinite amount of knowledge. We've certainly brought down child mortality, tick, tick, and tick. But if I don't, my room, my child's bedroom isn't at a certain temperature, the monitor beeps at me incessantly to say that the room is too hot. Apparently, they don't have babies in the Middle East. And if it gets too cold, they beeps at me again. So apparently they don't have babies in Alaska either. So, I mean, literally it's like a 2-degree range and this thing starts going, you are screwing up as a parent. You are screwing up as a parent. You are screwing up as a parent. Yeah, so my last piece of this, then I will hand back to Jess. Incidentally, my generation has now won the who has it harder in parenting because we've gone through a quarantine lockdown that no one else has ever had to go through. We win, you all lose. This is the hardest time to be a parent.
Okay, but there's so many things you have put forth for me to grab onto. So first of all, I want to say, yes, there's a lot of feedback. Children get a lot of feedback. They get feedback from other children. They get feedback from video games. They get feedback from television and media in general. There's a lot of feedback. You are the parent. You are always the parent. You are primary in their lives. And so yes, they can learn and model things that they saw, as you said, in The Simpsons, but you're the filter. You're the narrator. You're the one who explains that spitting is not appropriate, and here are all the reasons why. And we don't have a tolerance in our family for spitting, and they may do it again and again, but you're going to come back to the same thing every time, and eventually they will stop spitting, and your reaction to it may become stronger and stronger as they continue to do it. So ultimately, you're the arbiter, right? You decide what you're willing to bring into your home in terms of technology, in terms of media, in terms of exposure. I think it's very important. I think parents have sort of either step back and given themselves permission not to take charge of that, because it's hard, and you know, the kid comes home and my friends do this and this happens and that happens, and you don't want to ostracize your child, but you are the arbiter and you can make decisions around this, and you can make them with your children if you're explaining your rationale, your reasoning, and you sort of have an understanding and a culture in your home. I mean, I even say that at home you should have sort of a mission statement and a vision that you revisit with your children as they can participate more and more. So that's one of my first reactions. My other reaction is that.
But wait, before you get there, hold on to that thought for a moment, because we get to this Olivia versus Sam conversation again. And yes, for everybody, and we do have some questions, we do need to get to those. And yes, for everybody, I'm kind of dominating this, but I'm kind of offering myself as a lab rat so that you can hear the interaction and hopefully you can gain something from it. Like with Olivia, there's a consistent answer, which is you can do whatever you want to do, but there will be repercussions to whatever you do. So you decide how you want half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, and 4 hours to look. Do you want to go and watch TV? Do you want to stay up half an hour later? Do you want us to buy you toys? Do you want to choose what you get for dinner? Are these choices you want? Yes. Well, then I would strongly advise that you consider not kicking your brother in the head. Because if you do that, I'm going to remove those choices for you. Because, and I guess there was a lot of it that was also because she was a girl, and I want a very empowered woman that never needs a man to justify her existence in any way. I want her to go, you know what? No, I want to do this. No matter what the outcome, this is something I want to do. Fair enough, go for it. Now with Sam, you say, Sam, if you don't eat your dinner, you need to go and sit on the stairs. He says, fine, I'll go and sit on the stairs. And you're like, okay, all right, where do I go from here then?
Let him sit on the stairs.
Absolutely. And then he doesn't eat. So he wakes up 2 hours later, very, very hungry, and he hasn't got the cognizance to put, yes, Liz, I agree, they are nice children sometimes, but that doesn't help this conversation.
Sure it does, because they are nice children.
Yeah,
So you
they
leave
are
the
amazing,
plate, so you leave the plate with a cover on it, with fork, and when Sam gets up, maybe he eats it and maybe he doesn't.
yeah, and I think that's
Or you leave out the jar of peanut butter and bread, and Sam makes himself a sandwich. And granted, you'll find a mess in the morning, but Sam is taking care of his own problem.
Yeah, I honestly feel like Sam removes your ability to be a parent. Like, he's like, I'll just do it myself.
And that's okay. So you said you want your daughter to be strong and confident and in her own right. And Sam's going to be strong and confident and in his own right, whether you like it or not. So maybe you got to go with it. There's the research, right? There's the research. So what would happen if Sam said, I'm going to sit on the stairs, and you say, okay. And Sam sits on the stairs. And when he gets back up, something is there for him in terms of food, but no one is going to help. Sam's on his own. Is that the problem?
No, I'm fine with that. It's just, yeah, I constantly butt up against how to, like, I only know of one way, and it's the wrong way to manage Sam, which is literally physicality, which is literally to say, I will bring a gun to this knife fight, Sam, and I will win and you will lose. And take him. You're going to lose
every time. You're going to lose every time.
I did say I know it's wrong. I know
you're going to lose
wrong.
every time. Yeah. And when he's 13 and when he's 15, you're going to regret that approach.
Yeah, and there's an interesting set of comments in the panelists, which I'm going to tell people about, and I'm going to tell them about this story. So my wife, who's on here, thanks, they said Sam is Pete. She is correct. There was an occasion when myself and my mum were in Bern in Switzerland, because my dad used to do a lot of travel. And I wanted an ice cream. And my mum said, you can't have an ice cream. And I said, I want an ice cream. She said, no. I said, yes, no. And my mum said, we're leaving now.
How old were you, Peter?
I think I was 7, 8. And I had my Berlitz guide, which I had whenever I traveled. And my mum said, if you don't come now, we're going. And I said, fine, go. She walked around the corner. And according to her, and I believe her, she kept her eye on.
We have a visitor. Hello.
And when she did, well, let me carry on talking, and then we'll talk for a second, okay? 1 second. When she walked around the corner, she said she kept her eye on me, but when she walked away, I decided to teach her that she shouldn't do that, so I left. And I used my Berlitz guide to get myself an ice cream, tell somebody in a totally foreign language, tell someone that my mum was about to come and pay for it, and then walked myself to the bear pit halfway across town, looked at the bears, and then went to the hotel, and using my Berlitz guide, asked people where the hotel was. Apparently there was literally, like, I think I'm exaggerating this slightly, but the topic is still the same. There was like police out looking for me. And I was like, I was literally, for anyone that can see this on my camera, I was literally like, no, you say you're going to abandon me, I will bring a gun to this knife fight and see how you feel about it. So Sam is kind of
mom's shoes. You're going to have the same thing unless you can figure out a different approach.
Are you going to say hello to some people for me? You're going to say hello to Karen?
Hi, Olivia.
And then you're going to go back to Mummy.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi. Can I tell you something?
In a second, because there's lots of people watching. You can say hello and goodbye to them.
Hello, goodbye.
Goodbye.
I'll come to you soon.
Bribery. Let's go.
Yeah. So I think you have, you're two very different children, and therefore they need a different parenting approach. And you have to give up some of that top-down authority and stay calm and gather research and take a different approach until you figure out what approach works. And I think you'll have to be honest with Sam. He's young, so you may not understand everything that you're saying as of yet, but over time he will. And just be honest with him. And you might even give him these examples. Listen, these things happen in my life because we are so similar. We should talk about what another way to handle that. If it were to come to that between you and I, between you and your mom, you need to.
Okay, let's get to some of these questions. Jess, shall I hand back to you? Are you stable and solid?
I am, yes. My computer decided to throw a temper tantrum. and all I had to do is reboot. So we can talk
Thank you
about
for your time,
rebooting
as per
situations.
usual, Karen.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much for stepping in, Peter. That was super valuable, and I think the examples as well, extremely valuable, because so many can relate. So I really appreciate that, and thank you, Liz, to be on and adding these comments. And it's so beautiful to see. One of the things that Liz was asking on the back end, one of the questions we have is, do you find that tantrums are cumulative? I find that to be a very slippery slope. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think the tantrums are also connected with children's levels of frustration and of anger, and often those build, it builds upon itself. So a little tantrum can potentially eventually become a bigger tantrum and a bigger tantrum. I think that might be what Liz is asking about. And they do seem to come in cycles. So sometimes it's just looking at a child and saying, is this child eating right? Is this child sleeping well? Is this child feeling well? So often tantrums are an indicator of an oncoming cold, fever, illness, particularly in young children. They're not feeling well, they don't know how to convey that, but this discomfort causes them frustration and anger. And so I've often heard parents say, oh yeah, tomorrow or the day after, she'll probably have a fever. She'll probably be sick. This is sort of the precursor of that. And I think when you think about that, it helps you to kind of couch how you're going to approach it, maybe with a little bit more empathy sometimes. I also think that when it is cumulative, you also have to check yourself, because you are probably, and you might be, losing more patience more quickly. Your responses may be more dramatic and louder. And so in a sense, you're putting gasoline on the fire. And so as children ramp up, in some ways you have to kind of keep a level calm, so that you're not giving them more to be frustrated about. The other thing I think that's a big mistake is trying to negotiate with a child while they're in a tantrum. That they're not hearing you, they don't care, they can't absorb it, and it is just this, like, for many kids, an annoyance. It's that noise in their head, and they know probably that what you're saying is right, but they're not ready to receive it. And so often I think it's important for parents to just kind of stop the talk. I'm here for you. We're going to move on. If you can bring levity, if you can bring humor to it, if you can somehow distract and shift the behavior, that's great. You can talk about it later. You can talk about it while you're tucking them into bed. You can talk about it over, lunch or dinner. You can talk about it while you're pushing them on a swing in the park. There are better times to talk about what happened and to give them tools, skills, and to hear from them what they think they could have done. How could they have done it better? What did they feel? A lot of times you need to ask that question, like, what did you feel before this big temper tantrum happened? How do you know a temper tantrum's coming? Because often children know, like we know. I know, like, there's a little irritation. It's like the tag on the back of my dress, there's a little irritation, and it bothers me all day until I'm just like, I got to get this dress off, that kind of thing. And it's sort of the same way if you can use the analogy.
Thank you for that analogy. It's so true. And very often it is not even what it is we're upset about, that we're saying that we're upset about, that actually is the cause. And being able to go, like, what was it? What did you feel? So powerful, so powerful.
I think the other thing is that we ask children to take a time out. The thing about tantrums is sometimes they're fueled by attention. No matter how much attention, no matter what kind of attention, they're fueled by attention. And so sometimes if you can safely walk away and not give it the fuel of even your eyes on it, I'm going to take a time out. Mommy's going to take a time out and walk away, literally close a door. It just cuts the temper tantrum, because now I'm not getting the attention that I was trying to get.
You're so right. And a lot of people, like, I've seen children, and I wonder if that's why I was so sick when I was a kid. My parents loved me very much. My parents went through a divorce when I was young, and my stepdad was the best dad in the world. But at the same time, I was sick a lot of time, and I feel like it's translated into adulthood, where if I am weak or if I am sick, not anymore because I'm conscious of it, but I've noticed that that could have had an effect, not sure, that I would get attention and that people would take care of me, or, you know, help me. And but if I'm strong and if I'm doing okay, then I don't get any attention. So it's interesting to see how it develops in adulthood too. And it leads into, so even like being sick, it's like temper tantrums is also like being sick or having issues, or, you know, it's a very interesting subject there in terms of attention. And it kind of leads me into the question that we have from one of our VIPs in the back end. Do you think it is best to have a script, i.e. breathe, I'm here when you're done, or just leave and leave them alone completely? So it kind of relates to what you were just saying.
Again, you have to know your child. I think it's very helpful for them to know that you are there for them. So it might be, I'm here to help you when you need that help, but I'm going to go take a time out. I'm going to go have a seat in my bedroom, or I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea, or, you know, I'm going to take a time out. Kids like to be reassured that you're always there no matter what behavior. And sometimes the temper tantrum is just to test that. They're just testing that you are still there with them. You still love them. And oftentimes it seems counterintuitive, but as they come out of a temper tantrum, to snatch them up and give them a hug is really extraordinarily valuable. Just that human to human contact, that reassurance, because there'll be time to talk about what happened. You know, I wanted to also circle back to Peter's example in the grocery store. So I had a similar situation like this. I had two children that I adopted. They're 5 months apart. And so basically like having twins. And I took my kids to the supermarket, and I thought I had laid it out perfectly. And we had this down to a science, and they had their little shopping carts, and we were all good. And they had their list of things they had to find, just paint the same picture that Peter painted. And they started to have a fight over something on a shelf, and then over their carts, and whose cart was whose cart. And before I knew it, they were having a tremendous meltdown. And I could care about what everybody else thought, right? Which we do, and there's pressure around that. Or I could just decide to kind of close out the rest of the world and look at this and say, okay, what am I going to do about this? And what message do I want to deliver right now to my children? Which frankly was the message that you will never do this in a supermarket. This is never going to happen. And I snatched one under one arm and one under the other arm, and I walked out with them carrying on and said, I'm sorry, there's a cart in aisle, whatever, 7. I'm sorry, I'm leaving. And I left. And, you know, I was slightly embarrassed, and I was frustrated, and, you know, strapped them into their car seats. And I don't know if I lectured them all the way home or not. I don't know if I was a model parent in that moment. But I knew that what I had to deliver was, this is not going to happen. If this happens, this happens. And I think there are times when that is called for. It's absolutely called for, particularly around safety, and when it impacts others in a detrimental and negative way. I mean, I wasn't going to get any shopping done, and I wasn't going to be able to check out of the supermarket, and people were going to have to deal with my 2 screaming children. That just was not acceptable. So there are those moments, and I want to be sure that parents understand that too, that there are those moments where you just have to step in, take them up in your arms, and move on, as long as you can, right? They get older, and then you can't do that. But I think it's important to know that's okay.
And no matter what, reboot, restart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and no matter what people think, you know, you're still the parent, and you're still making the decisions for your children and for your family. I remember going back to that supermarket, you know, with a little sheepishly soon after, and the manager came to me and said, "Thank you so much." I don't see parents do that too often. So interesting. He appreciated it. I don't know, you know, again, if it was the model parenting thing to do, but for me in the moment, it was what I thought as a parent was called for. And ultimately, you know, I have to be in charge.
And my burning question, so did it happen again?
No, but I want to say something else. The other thing that did happen is, once we had calmed down, once we had all, you know, they had had their naps and we were all together, we had a conversation around it. And first I assured them that if it did happen again, I would do the same thing. But what happened, and how could we avoid that going forward? You know, what, and it was silly. And they were, I think they were probably about 3-ish. So I could reason with them to a certain degree, and they could verbalize what they felt and how they, you know, they could try and make some promises about what they would do in the future. Sometimes
So
hard.
I don't have kids personally, so maybe this question isn't relatable, but if I think as an adult and in adult relationships, sometimes bringing things back can reignite the flame, can reignite the what happened, right? Does that ever happen with kids, and what do you do in that?
Sure.
What do you
And
do
then
then?
it may be this, you know, I thought this would be a good time to talk about it. It seems like it's not a good time to talk about it, but you know, we have to. And so let's think about talking about that later at dinner, or let's think about talking about that tonight when we tuck in, or let's think about talking about that in the morning during a snuggle. But we're going to talk about it, you know, it's going to come back. But ultimately kids, they want guidance. They want guidance. They want parameters. They'll test them, but they want them. And if you can come to agreements, then you're better off. You know, that's why I come back to having sort of a family mission, a family vision, and some kind of basic rules that you all agree upon for your home, for your family. And children can absolutely and should absolutely participate in that. It's the same thing we do in our school. You know, how do our school rules get made, and how do we maintain those rules, and how do we address people when those rules are broken? Those are all things that we develop within our school and come back to often. And kids have great capacity, tremendous capacity. If you address them as if they have capacity, they will have capacity.
Thank you so much for that. I'm making notes because it's so valuable what you're sharing. They will have capacity if you address them, and it's like any relationship at the end of the day. It's like if you treat somebody as though they're not intelligent, they won't be.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You know, I think too, it's important because we don't want to hold ourselves up as perfect in front of our children. So I think too, it's important to share with them examples in your own life. So if you can equate their temper tantrum to something in your life, and it might be something now, it might be something when you were their age, but if you can give them examples, then you're bringing up other skill sets, right? So some children are auditory learners, and some children are kinesthetic, and some children are, you know, there's a multitude of ways that they learn that maybe are more emotional, and so on and so forth. So if you can give them examples that spark other parts of their brain, other ways of thinking, and also say, I am not perfect, but here's something I learned from this experience. Or here's why I'm reacting this way to this experience with you. It's because I had this experience, and maybe my mom handled it like this, and that didn't really work for me. From that, I learned that maybe I could handle it like this. And so that's what I'm trying. That's why I'm trying this today. And could I try something different? What do you think?
And one of the super valuable things that you're talking about, and it's also mentioned in the comments, is the best piece of advice: always follow through. It's true, like
Yes.
sometimes things happen and you don't want to talk about it, or I'll talk about it later, and it never happens. So it's really important to always follow through. Can you talk a little bit about
For
that?
so many reasons. First of all, because if you don't follow through, then you're almost in your silence allowing the behavior. You're allowing everything that happened around the behavior to be the right answer when maybe it wasn't. Maybe you weren't at your best. Maybe your child wasn't at their best. Maybe there wasn't a meeting of minds, you know, so on and so forth. So that's a problem. The other problem is if you don't address it, oftentimes you're carrying it. So you're carrying the anger, frustration, the child's carrying the anger and the frustration, the hurt maybe around it. You know, maybe a child, I mean, look, as a parent, how many times did your child say, I hate you? that hurts, right? That hurts to the core. That has brought people to tears, parents to tears, and to really fret. You don't want to carry those things around. And so it's important to address it, because otherwise you're carrying it and it will fester. It will come back at a time when you do not expect it will come back. It will surface, and you might then say it in a, snarky way. You might say it in an angry way. You might say it in a punitive way. Now I'm piling it up. You said this to me, then you spit at me, then you kicked me in the supermarket, and you did this and you did that, and now I'm really mad. Well, why did you have to get to that place? Maybe we could mitigate early on these behaviors because we're talking about them and we're being honest.
So we have one last question. I'm conscious of the time. So we have 4 minutes left. Peter, you're on the background. I know want to ask a question. Can you come on camera and ask the question real quick?
So it's, you said best first follow through. I totally agree. But what happens when you make a threat that you suddenly realize it was a very, very bad idea? And like with an adult, like let's take a stupid example. If you do that again, I'm going to have to let you go. And then you realize you're angry, and you can go back to them after and say, listen, I need to apologize. I didn't mean that. But the underlying principle still stands. You can't do that, and here's why. And you can have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say to your son or daughter, or who it might be, if you do that again, you're not going to that birthday party. And you realize that you were angry or whatever, and the threat is far greater than the actual stimulus. And you're then in, I feel that you're then in that, oh crap, what do I do now? Because I don't want to follow through, but they've just actually still pushed the button.
Right.
What is, can you bail on the always follow through advice?
The same thing. The same thing, Peter. So you say you make the difference between an adult and a child, and I don't necessarily make that difference. I see two people, one being quite a bit younger than the other, right? So to me, it's the same thing. So you sit your child down and you say, I was so angry and so frustrated in that moment. This was the first thing that came to mind. And I realize now that, you threw a stick and I took away gold, right? And so it's not appropriate. So can we think about, there needs to be a consequence. This behavior requires a consequence. I'm thinking instead of maybe this, and this, or this, what are you thinking of? Let's settle on a consequence, because I realized taking the birthday party away was too serious a consequence for.
Which is one of the questions I think somebody asked earlier in the chat of, is it appropriate to get children to choose their own consequence? And you're saying absolutely yes.
Yeah, in most cases yes, but with your input as well. You're all players in the moment.
Yeah, give them an A, B, or C. Don't give them an open book.
Exactly. Exactly. And if
Olivia would go,
then it's give me a D that I can live with, right?
Yeah.
Give me a D.
Yeah, Olivia would go, I won't watch one specific type of TV for 30 minutes. Okay, great. Thanks, Olivia. That's not quite what I was thinking. I know we're conscious of time. Thanks for asking.
Peter, I just want to say this, Peter. I just want to say this. When Olivia says it, even though it might not be sufficient a consequence in your mind, what Olivia's agreed to is that there is a consequence required, and she's ready to take that consequence. So therefore, she's agreed that the behavior was egregious.
Good point. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That's one of those mic drop moments for me, because that's the situation that certainly Sam can literally get us to. It's like, ah! And then you say something like, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Please don't. Oh, you have done. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Choose your consequences carefully. I say make a list of them beforehand, so you have them in your brain, in your back pocket, so you don't run to whatever comes first.
As per usual.
Have a great day, Peter. Thank you.
Amazing call. Thank you so much. Very conscious of the time. We have a hard stop right now at 11:45. We have every Thursday, we have Karen coming on 11 to 11:45 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure you're signed up at www.hackmankind.com so you can have access to the back channel, to the VIP back office, or backstage. That's what I meant. to make sure that you can ask Karen your questions. This has been super helpful. And you can also be like Peter on here, asking your questions, putting on in the comments, and it's so valuable. Thank you so much for being here, Karen.
Sure.
A bunch of mic drop moments. One final words before we go.
Research, plan, make agreements with your children before you're in the heat of the moment, and give them some room right now. Give yourself some room right now. We're all stressing and struggling. So yeah, that's the best I can tell you today. So thank you. I love having everybody here. I love having all the questions. It moves our conversation forward. So have a great day. Jessica, thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been here.
Yes, thank you for everybody commenting and for tuning in on the other channels that you're watching this. If you're watching this on recording, make sure www.hackmankind.com so you can have access to all of Karen's content and more. Thank you so much, Karen. Take care. Have a beautiful day.
Bye-bye.